So yes, so let's talk about actually what scaling means. So for me, scaling was setting up Get Ahead back in 2010, wanting something that was flexible, that fitted in with my kids, but knowing that I didn't want to be doing client work. I didn't want it just to be me, which is where the brand name Get Ahead came. I didn't want to build it around my complicated surname. So I had that vision, but I'm totally aware that for other people, scale could be, well, I wanted a bit more free time in the week. So I'm hoping that you will all get a couple of sort of golden nuggets from this short presentation. And I know, Denise, you mentioned you'd like to know more about franchising. I'll touch on that because that's what I've done. I franchised the business 5 years ago, but more than happy to take it offline if anyone's sort of keen to know a little bit more about franchising, because it's quite a minefield. So I wanted to start off with a question. What is your vision? So it's really, really important. And I find at the beginning of every year, I do, and I'm not a wooey person, but I do my vision board. So this is my vision board for last year, centering around me. And also I wanted to do, I turned 50 last year. So it was 50, going to Australia, meeting my team there, and various other bits. But I find the visual piece really, really interesting for me. And I've just done my one for this year. So again, if any of you want any tips on how to do that, I'm more than happy to have a chat. But what I have felt it's enabled me is to look at my 5-year vision and then to sort of break that down. So for me, back in sort of 2015, it was how am I going to scale? Franchising formed part of that. What I also do every month is check in with where I am for my year. And my business coach last year sort of recommended that I sort of almost had a date with myself. So at the beginning of every month, I will revisit where I'm at against my goals for that year. I'll go and buy myself a nice coffee in a local hotel and sit in there. And at the beginning, it felt a bit odd, but actually now I really enjoy that time and get value from it. And it's interesting just being able to tick things off and add things to that list just gives me the clarity that I need. And a previous coach had worked very much on 90-day plans as well. And that might be something some of you are already doing or something you might think about, but it's just anything that will break down and give you that clarity and be able to give you a sense of what you need to achieve each month. And for me, having a Wednesday as my day where I don't have any client meetings, or I choose exactly what I want to do. And I was laughing with Sarah saying normally I have personal training in the park at 6:30 on a Wednesday. So thank you for giving me an excuse not to have that. But that's been a real game changer for me, having that space. And I think as business owners and leaders, we all need to feel we've got some control. And by doing that sort of Wednesday piece, that's been really helpful. The second point I wanted to talk about was delegation. I'm not going to hone in and do a sales pitch around the benefits of outsourcing. And I know Jess in the room today would be a huge advocate for that as well. But if you're being brutally honest, what is your own hourly rate? It may be £50 an hour, it might be £100 an hour, it might be less than that. But if you think about elements of what you do that you could potentially give to somebody else to do to free you up, that's often quite a sort of a good question. And it's something we work with clients on, sort of saying, well, if you're an expert in marketing strategy, why are you fiddling around doing some of the admin that you're doing when actually you could give that to somebody else within your team or outsource it and actually free yourself up so you can be doing the work that you personally should be doing. And my husband used the phrase stick to your knitting, and I thought that was quite an interesting one around actually really focusing on your passion, on your skill set, and that will be amazing what that energy will give you in terms of structure. So for me, not doing client delivery was a real game changer for me. So when I set the business up, I was obviously doing everything. And then it's like, actually, you know, my strength and my passion and what I do best is in selling and engaging with clients, not sitting around doing some of the client delivery. So, you know, another good question is, what is your superpower? And that can sound a bit cringy, but actually we all have that superpower. That's why we often have set up a business in the first place. So really look at identifying that and working on that. And again, for me, finances was one of the first things to go, because I know I'm not skilled at that. And the thought of sort of capturing all that data on a regular basis used to send me into a bit of a spin. So it's interesting. I often find with team members and clients that receipts and expenses are the things that someone will hand over to other people to do to free them up. And if you want to scale your business, you do have to remove you from part of the business, because ultimately we all know that, you know, people buy into you, and I know that I'm the face of Get Ahead, but I'm also, through the franchising, given that power and that ability to own something to other people, and it's not all about me. And I thought it was quite interesting. I've been recording videos of myself for the team, for the franchisees, and actually the feedback was actually their client base don't need to know about me. And so that's been quite an interesting shift, sort of removing me a little bit from it, but also having a presence there. The third thing I wanted to talk about was organising you. So I'm not sure how many of you are currently fans of Calendly. I know Sarah and Peter use it, and that for me has been a huge game changer. So Calendly enables you to give slots in your diary to other people. And I remember when I first heard about it, feeling a little bit anxious about, well, how am I going to control this? Because I don't want my diary to be given over to so many different people. But what I've done is been quite organised in the slots that I give. So I might have a slot for a discovery call with a potential client, one for mentoring, one for someone that's interested in the franchise. And that's really enabled me to feel I've got control, but also it looks professional that you're able to offer that up. And I've got a link on my LinkedIn profile as well that gives somebody a slot. And it's about making it as easy as you can for people to get in touch with you without you feeling, and I'm sure a number of you have had this like I have, where you're back and forth in a diary and it all gets a bit confusing, and then you feel that it doesn't look great. So it's all that element of how you come across can be made so much easier with something like Calendly. Time blocking as well has been a big game changer for me over the years, of actually feeling that I've got control and blocking time in my diary for the different things I want to do. And Peter's touched on the value of one-to-ones earlier, and that is huge for any of us, but we also know it can be time consuming. So I've got quite good at saying, yes, I've got this slot in my diary, send the Calendly link, but limit it to half an hour. We can all achieve a lot in a dedicated amount of time, rather than feeling that you've got to sort of, or feel awkward about not putting a time limit on it. And actually I think people appreciate that even more, and you will, and so will your business. And another big thing is the power of saying no. It can be easier for some people than others. And I publish an article in Elite Franchise every month, and this last month's one was on the power of saying no. And I've had some really interesting feedback around people saying actually it is really helpful to empower yourself to say no. And actually people appreciate that. You shouldn't be hugely available all of the time. And actually if you can overcommit, then your business is going to suffer. And as I said, Wednesdays is my time in my diary, and I do say no to people, and actually it's got a lot easier over the last year by being able to say that. The fourth topic I wanted to talk about was marketing, and I'm sure there are a number of marketeers on here today that would back me up in saying you don't have to be on every single social media platform just because you've got your own business. And I think that is often a bit of a sticking point. You might launch a business and think, well, I need to be showing up on every single marketing platform. Well, actually being consistent, showing up on something like LinkedIn, which I know Peter's a huge fan of, is where you get the traction. And if you're consistent and showing up and sharing and caring, and that's another big thing, just blasting out posts that are sort of generic or all about you isn't going to give you the rewards that you're looking for. You want to get your personality across, so by being consistent but engaging with other people's posts. And I would imagine most of you are connected with each other on LinkedIn. If you're not, do that after this meeting. Go through and just spend a little bit of time connecting with a personal message. And just, I think probably most of you have seen it on LinkedIn, you've got the little bell that you can click on, and that will make sure that your local community is appearing in your news feed, and they will really value your connection and your comments and things with them as you would with them. So it works both ways, but just don't feel you have to do every single social media platform, is what I'm wanting to say. Fall in love with one or two, and the rest will follow if necessary. So consistency is a big thing, like I've said. So it's about showing up on a regular basis and giving interesting content, interacting and not broadcasting. And people love to see the people behind the brand, and that's been a big thing for me. When I set the business up, I was hugely aware of the power of branding. I'm a retail buyer in a pre-mummy life, so for me, I wanted to set that brand up. You can see my cardboard cutout behind me, and I self-published a book a couple of years ago, and that character forms part of my book. It's about my franchise, but you know, she shows up in regular parts of my branding, and I get some comments around. People can see that consistency. They start to recognise us, but people love to know who the team are. So last week we had some photos taken for our new website, and I shared those on LinkedIn yesterday, and it's just been interesting hearing people's comments about, yes, stock imagery is not where we need to be. We need to be seeing what people are like, really, and not hiding behind other things. So that if you are revisiting your websites, and I know there are a number of web developers on the call today, I'm sure you would agree with me that having some fresh photos, and I know lots of people don't like having their pictures taken. You know, if that's the case, there are ways around it, but it's just being natural and getting that engagement. And that's what I've always had positive feedback on, is that people recognise me when they see me. And there's nothing worse than an outdated profile picture. And I've got a friend who's currently looking for work, and his picture must be about 20 years old. And I was sort of saying to him subtly, you know, you really need to get an updated picture, because you want to be the real deal when people meet you. Exhibitions have played a big role in our scaling and developing of our business. So if you haven't done a business expo before, do bear that in mind. They're certainly coming back with a vengeance. And I know my team in Oxford have done a couple there. They can be overwhelming. They can be quite long and tedious, but actually if you've got a game plan and you know what you want to achieve from them, they are hugely beneficial and powerful, and a great way of meeting your local connections. And I've done business expos really from the beginning of launching the business, and I look back at the various photos of us with our orange scarves looking like EasyJet flight attendants, but actually again it was a way of representing ourselves there, the branding, and that's how my franchisees will scale, is by being at these face-to-face events. Blogs are a great way of showcasing what you do. Again, it's variety in the blog, so adding value in different ways, but having fresh content on your website is critical. And again, will give you a wider reach, something else to talk about, something to perhaps guest blog and things like that is really valuable at scaling. And last year we invested in a quiz, and I've got 2 quizzes on the website, one for potential clients that might like to benefit from outsourcing, and another quiz for people that might be interested in my franchise. And that's a nice sort of entry point. You're giving somebody the opportunity to learn a little bit about how you could support them without them having to perhaps be overly brave and make that first phone call. So it's a soft way of connecting. So again, I can share more information on quizzes with you after this meeting if you wish, but I found it really, really valuable, and it's a lovely way of me adding people to our email marketing list as well. The 5th thing, excuse me, I wanted to talk about was PR. I'm not sure how many of you will Google your name, Google your business name, but it's something I tend to do probably once a month just to see what's being picked up for me. And having a PR manager, and I've had access to a PR manager probably from virtually the very beginning. I chose to invest in that. I have 2 or 3 hours of Caroline's time a month, has been really valuable at getting our reach and helping us scale. So she will respond to journal requests, good old award entries. And again, if awards are something that are on your radar, but you perhaps haven't had a confidence to think about, then again, I would really recommend you look at it. There are, you'll notice on local business awards, so many different categories, from new starters right through to more established businesses. But by claiming that slightly cringy award winning has been interesting in how we've helped sort of scale and grow. And journo requests come up on Twitter and various social media platforms. So last month I was interviewed for a magazine about friendship, you know, something totally unrelated to running the business, but another way of a touch point to get the business name out there. So do think about that. And as I said, do Google yourself. It can be a little bit cringy. I look at photos of myself over the last 10 years and think, how did I look like that? But it's just, again, it's getting that profile and just interesting about where you can get picked up. Franchising is obviously how I've scaled the business. And I know, Denise, you mentioned you'd like to know a little bit more about that. So I would say to any of you, if you're thinking about how to scale, there are so many options. There's licensing, there's having people represent you in different parts of the country. And that's what I did initially. I launched softly in Bristol and had somebody there that went networking for me because I wanted to see if she could sell in the same way as I could. And sure enough, we found some momentum there. So that's where the franchising first came into my sort of radar. It's not cheap, you know, you can imagine the sort of legalities around it, and not every business is suitable for franchising, but I certainly don't regret what we've done, and it's enabled me to represent ourselves around the country in different ways. And my franchisees love the fact that they've got that marketing toolkit but they can make it their own business as well. So that's been a big thing, but I'm more than happy to have a separate conversation if any of you are interested in franchising. I can share some of that information. I'm just training as a franchise consultant as well, so got lots of bits I can share with you on that. Mentoring and coaching has been invaluable to me during my business journey, and I remember after the first year of business meeting a business coach, and she was getting a qualification, she needed somebody to be one of her sort of case studies. So I started working with Bev, and then I saw the value, felt the value, because actually, yeah, I loved it. I loved having, like I mentioned earlier, a cheerleader, somebody in my camp. So started working with her, and I remember it being, it was £150. It was a lot of money when I was first launching, but it was invaluable. And so if you are thinking about, or perhaps I shouldn't, or perhaps I could, there are so many different levels of coaching, and I would imagine there are coaches within your network, Peter, aren't there as well? But there are also free coaching things. So I'm a mentor for Virgin Startup. So anyone that gets a startup loan gets access to 8 hours of free mentoring. I'm a business mentor, so I'm very much a cheerleader. I'm more vocal than possibly a coach would be, which is why I've gone down that route. But I was also aware that local areas will often have free resources and things like that as well. So if you haven't had coaching, do consider it. And again, more than happy to have a chat and point you in the direction of somebody appropriate for you. And then finally, I wanted almost to leave you with some homework in terms of be honest and look at your current business structure. Is it all about you? Are you right at the centre and everything feeds off you? Are you thinking, actually, I could probably do with freeing up some time, so I could probably get rid of something? And if you're thinking, well, what is that? We will often say to clients, list everything you're doing in the week, where you're spending your time. And actually that can often be quite an eye-opener, because you think you're spending not very long doing something, and then you look back and think, oh my God, I spent 3 hours invoicing when I could have been doing some business development, or I could have been networking and could have had someone else to do that. So that's probably quite a useful thing to go away and do, and sort of do your structure and perhaps look at what your ideal structure would be, and then work out the steps for you to get there. And also another big question is, can your business run when you're on holiday? So there are telephone answering, for example, that's available, people that can look at your diary. But, we all need to have those breaks, and it's not a selfish thing to think about. You really, that's why I would imagine you've gone into business in the first place, is for that flexibility. So don't sacrifice that, and get a plan of action together. So I don't know if I've spoken too fast, Peter, but that was my sort of the main gist. And as I said, I'm more than happy to connect on LinkedIn and have chats afterwards if anyone's got any other sort of direct questions.
No, it's brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Rebecca. I guess